Welcome to Navigating Consumer and Family Law Challenges. Insights from SoCal's trusted attorneys.
Hello and welcome back to Navigating Consumer and Family Law Challenges with Amanda Hill. Amanda is a Southern California family and consumer protection attorney who helps clients protect their families and finances during life's most difficult transitions. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and the last few weeks, there's been a lot of talk about Love Island Season 7. With the season wrapping up recently with Amaya Papaya as the winner, today we are talking about what we call Love Island Syndrome, when fast new relationships inspired by dating shows and social media trends move too quickly and create some serious legal consequences in custody cases. Amanda, welcome back.
Hi, nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. So interesting topic. My wife's a big fan of Love Island. I see every once in a while when I'm coming into the room. We all know that reality shows definitely glamorize quick love. That's just a common theme across them. Can moving in too fast hurt your custody case?
Yes, I think it depends on each individual circumstance, but this can become a hot topic of dispute. For example, I had a case one time where, the other party, right away moved on to a new relationship, and the other ex-spouse didn't, and so it became a very, hot button topic, and the parameters around what the introduction of the children to the new significant other would be like, became a really deep conversation and what that would look like. In general, though, the courts aren't going to get too involved in that and micromanaging that, but I do think it's something that comes up quite a bit.
Are the courts allowed to consider who you're dating when deciding parenting time?
Yes, they can if it's going to impact the safety and well-being, right, of the children. So an extreme example of that is somebody is abusing substances and they're now dating somebody that they attend AA together with. Yeah,
Mhm.
probably not a great situation.
Yeah.
The court can limit any alone time that the children or the child has with that individual and make strict restrictions on what that contact looks like.
Okay. So yeah, anything if a new partner has any sort of a criminal record or past substance abuse issues, any issues on their sort of, in their past or on their record, they can kind of step in and make some decisions on time spent.
Yeah, I mean, it's if the parties can't reach an agreement on any of those parameters, then you can put that issue before the court and then a judge can make that decision. And again, the judge is going to really just look at what is in the best interest of the children. Does it make sense for these restrictions to be put into place to protect these children, to make sure that they're not being exposed to anything inappropriate or that would harm them in any way?
Hmm. I mean, in your opinion, just based on what you've seen in your career, how soon is too soon to introduce your new partner to the kids? Is there a time where you think it's best? Is there certain milestones, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the age of the children, right? I think if they're really young, that can be a huge impact,
Yeah.
right? And being careful of that and not confusing the children or child. I think if they're much older as well, though, even if they're like teenagers in high school, that can have just as much of a big impact on them because they have all their own feelings that they're dealing
Yeah.
with in the
Uh,
separation of
yeah.
their parents. So I would say no sooner than 6 months is my, best estimate. But it's also going to really depend on how serious the relationship is, too, right? If it's something that's not so serious and you just began dating, definitely I wouldn't recommend that. If it's something where you are already very serious and potentially you're now going to be moving in with this individual, you definitely want to introduce them before, hey, we're moving in with Johnny or whoever it is. There needs to be some sort of transition there. I also think it's important that you have transparency with your ex partner,
Hmm.
the parents of the children, as to who the person is, and offer an opportunity for them to meet that person, right? And to get to know them. It doesn't have to be, yeah, we're going to hang out and have Sunday dinners, but
Hmm.
it should be something to where they are at least given the opportunity to meet them and, so to speak, shake their hand and maybe, meet at a coffee shop or something like that.
I think there's like a thing in humans a lot of times where we want to replace very quickly. We've all known people, even when it's not marriage, when it was just back in our dating days, of people that were like, wow, that person moved on too fast or something. And it's like you're feeling a void or something like that. Do you find that people do it too fast, like even before maybe the divorce is complete?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's all relative, right? Because some people can be separated, quote unquote, for 2 years before they actually file anything with the court to get a divorce finalized.
Good
So,
point.
in that circumstance, then okay, maybe it makes sense for you to be able to introduce that new significant other. On the flip side, though, there are situations where people file and it's a shock to the other spouse, and now the other spouse is just figuring out, oh my gosh, my spouse wants a divorce. Those, I would say, if you want to reduce the anxiety and the stress and the litigation, then you need to give that other spouse some time if they're still figuring out and processing the actual divorce itself. And that's just not because you're required to under the law, but it's just best practice so that you can reduce how the process goes. Because the more stress you put on the other person, it's very likely the more stress your process is going to be to get through to the end.
Yeah, the more contentious the actual proceedings are.
Absolutely, yes. And then therefore it's going to hit your pocketbook too, because if you're not being amicable, you're not being respectful, then it's very likely that they're going to want to fight you over every little nickel and dime, every vacuum, every couch, right? So
Mhm.
just take that into consideration is what I would say, when bringing up new relationships. I think the other thing that a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it's the second most common reason for why people get a divorce is infidelity. And so if the person that you're now leaving your marriage with is the person that you were unfaithful with and are now in a relationship with, obviously that's going to be have a different approach, right? And you should handle that a little differently. And it may take years until your ex-spouse can feel comfortable being in the same room with that individual. So, that's it. All is on an individual basis on what the circumstances are, is why you're getting a divorce too.
Okay, I'm going to admit I'm a little surprised that infidelity is number two. Can I take a stab at number one? Is it money?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
cool. All right. All
yes.
right. I still am kind of surprised that money's not number two, to be honest with you.
I think they go back and forth. I
Yeah.
think, and if you read different statistics, I think they're going to tell you different things, but those are the top two. And I think sometimes the money one can be a whole different extreme. It could be a gambling issue. It
Yeah.
could be financial infidelity, what people call, right? Which is like somebody has a whole bunch of debt that the other spouse didn't even know about,
Mhm.
or they're just not, sadly there's a lot of people that go through economic hardship and they as partners aren't strong enough to get through that economic hardship,
Sure.
whatever that may be, a spouse losing their job or what have you.
Pandemics or whatnot.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is it possible to, other than what we already talked about, like uh, drug use and things like that, criminal
Mhm.
record, are there other situations where someone can lose parenting time because of cohabitation with a new partner?
I wouldn't necessarily say parenting time. I would say, again, if it's somebody who is putting their health or safety at risk, and let's say maybe by let's say moving in with them and they're now cohabitating, the children at issue no longer have their own space. And maybe now they have to live on a couch or sleep on a couch. The rule of thumb in general is the courts are going to want to make sure that the child or children have their own bed. They don't have to have their own bedroom. That's not realistic, especially being in California. Cost of living is very high, but you
Mhm.
do have to have your own sleeping space. So if that becomes triggered, where basically the children are being pushed out of their life and they don't have their own space, that's something that the court would consider and maybe adjusting what the parenting time looks like for the other spouse.
Can you include restrictions on romantic introductions or things like that in a parenting plan?
Yes, you
Oh,
can. And in fact, I've done that several times. I've actually done it too in prenuptial agreements,
uh,
where if we were to get divorced, then this is our idea of what it would look like if at that time we have children, and what we would do as far as introducing new significant others. And as far as parenting plans go, the parties are separating, they're getting a divorce, or it's a paternity action and they've never been married, but they're going through a custody dispute. You can include that, like both parties acknowledge that neither will introduce a new significant other without first, for example, I did this once, you know, uh, giving the other spouse or the other ex-partner an opportunity to meet that new person, and also their contact information for emergencies, as well as the opportunity to run a background check. I've seen that before, as well as not allowing them to be alone for more than 2 hours at a time, with the children. The hope is that you never get to that part, right?
Yeah.
That things are amicable enough that you don't need to include that. But I will say that there's a lot of mixed families, meaning people are now divorced and they too have other children from their prior relationship, right?
Right.
So you'll have, so to speak, quasi stepchildren living together. So that also comes into play too, of okay, like what is the contact going to be like with those children and my children? That sometimes comes up as well.
Hmm. What recourse is there if a child is uncomfortable with a new partner?
I mean, I think it depends on what the uncomfortable level is. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, the transition itself is already going to be uncomfortable, and some of that is unavoidable
Sure.
in the separation and divorce process. So it's really going to depend on, is it because they feel unsafe? Is it because they feel uncomfortable because I would hate to say it, but to give an example, there's a 14-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl, and they're supposed to be sharing a room. Probably not appropriate, right?
Right.
That's something that a court may consider.
Right.
But if it's more so, these are just kind of strangers and I don't really know them, and this is all new to me, I think that might be something where um, the two ex spouses would consider, hey, maybe this child needs to go to some sort of therapy, at least temporarily, to kind of deal with their issues with the transitions that they're facing.
Hmm. Yeah. What about, videos, photos, social media posts about relationships? Do those come up in court sometimes too?
I think it would only come into play when, for example, somebody is saying, I'm not in a relationship or they're not living with me. And then social media posts are saying otherwise, right? So it could be
Mm-hmm.
used for impeachment purposes, so to speak, to say, yeah, you're not being credible. Social media says this and you're saying this. But other than that, I mean, I always recommend, and best practice is, be when you're going through this process, especially if your divorce is not over and you're coming up with temporary plans while you navigate the rest of the divorce, like dividing assets and debts, just keep it simple. The less the better on social media. You never know who's looking at it. Even if you have your stuff settings on private, you don't know a friend of a friend of a friend who might, take a screenshot of it and send it. Just really is best practice. Just limit what you're posting.
We've talked about social media on this show before, I believe, and that's just kind of a
Yes,
general best practice for a lot of situations.
exactly.
Just watch what you're posting.
Exactly.
Yeah. With the lead in on this show was talking about Love Island. I even called it Love Island syndrome, I believe, where people just move too fast. Do you feel like this happens a lot, where fast romances kind of cause problems with custody cases?
I do.
Yeah.
I would say, unfortunately, the pattern is, I would say men usually move on much faster in general. Again, I'll give the caveat that's in general, than women do. I mean, sometimes women take years before, or maybe they never get into a new relationship. Men, I tend to see they usually are, if they're filing for divorce, they probably have already moved on,
Hmm.
and they already have somebody new in the picture. That's the trend that I've just seen over 10 years that I've been practicing. And so that's just the general kind of trend I've seen. But um, I will say that, if you can, even if you are, nobody's discouraging you from moving on. If the relationship didn't work out, it didn't work
Sure.
out. California is a no fault state. That's fine. But there is a way to go about your movements to be respectful of the other person, right? Like you don't want to be doing it out of spite, or doing, for going back to social media, posting certain things out of spite. Like you can do those things. That's not really a legal thing. But as far as best strategy goes, I mean, come on. Do you want to really spend all your money fighting tooth and nail and be seen as someone who's being petty and throwing stuff in their face? Or do you want to be respectful? Especially if it's somebody who you've been in a relationship with for, you know, many years and share
Right.
children with, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Because I would also say, just to add a little bit, I would also say that it can impact your relationship in the long term with your children,
Yeah.
especially
I
if you
agree.
have teenage children and they see you navigate how you treat, your soon to be ex-spouse through this process. That can be impactful for the rest of their lives. And they may no longer trust that the other sex, whatever it may be, because now in their relationships going forward in the future, they feel like, well, if my dad did that or my mom did that, I now have trust issues of the other sex, or what the or my significant other, what have you, right?
Hmm.
So just keep that in mind. You're making an impression on your children too if there are children involved.
I've known people who've had issues because of that. Tough divorces that they went through as kids, and it affected them later in life. And admittedly, it affected them later in life. So yeah, definitely a good tidbit. I think too, like obviously jumping into relationships quickly is nothing new. It's been around forever. People have done that all the time. But do you feel like with the success and amount of these shows like Love Island out there, are people jumping in quicker more often? Do you think it's changing anything?
Um, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to really speak on that. I do think that there is this like trend with younger people, right? Younger generation, of like this idea of uh, you know, maybe meeting in a more or a less organic way, right? Then, it's either in social media or through these types of dating websites or
Yeah, the dating
platforms,
apps.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Like all of that. I think that has also changed how people operate in their relationships and how they communicate and how they deal with relationships or marriage. I
It's a good
would
point.
say that in general, though, the rate of marriage is actually less than it was years ago. But in response to that, the divorce rate is actually reduced. Not by much, but by 5 to 6% in the last couple of years. That's just because people who are getting married are more serious about it and they
They're
know what
waiting
they
a little
want.
longer too
Exactly. They're a
later in
little bit
life.
older,
Mhm.
or maybe this is their second marriage and maybe they got married really young and then they waited until their 40s or 50s to get remarried because they quote unquote learned their lesson the first time.
Yeah.
So there's different trends that are kind of us attorneys are kind of watching now as far as that goes.
Do you have any final advice to any parents that might be listening that are navigating a new romance and a custody order at the same time?
Yes, I mean, always think about what the impact is going to be on your children. And if your children were in your shoes, right? And what example do you want to set for them
Mhm.
of how they are going to navigate as adults those types of hard situations, even if you're the person that got cheated on and so to speak, really cannot stand the other person and your judgment is clouded, to take a step back, take a beat, find out, confide in who you can as a confidant or a resource, go to therapy to try to deal with those emotions. Because if you can navigate it and with grace, and you can navigate it with respect to the other person, it's going to be much better for your children and it'll be better for them in the long run. It's still going to impact them, but it's going to be far less traumatic for them.
I think that's really good advice for sure. All right. Well, thanks for listening to today's episode of Navigating Consumer and Family Law Challenges. If you're managing custody concerns while navigating a new relationship, Amanda and the team at K&H Law Group are here to help. Visit kandhlawgroup.com to learn more. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review. We very much appreciate it. Amanda, it's always great talking to you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.